Look, I need to talk to you about something that's been weighing on me. It's about Donald Trump's health. I spent 8 years in that office. I know what it takes. I've carried the nuclear codes. I've made decisions in the middle of the night that I still think about. And I'm telling you, that job will destroy you if you're not ready for it. Physically, mentally, both. I watched myself age in real time. My hair went gray. My face changed. But my mind stayed sharp because it had to. There was no other option. What I'm seeing now with Trump, the cognitive decline, the physical deterioration, it's not just worrying, it's dangerous. And nobody's being straight about it. Not his doctors, not his staff, not the media. His supporters won't even acknowledge it. But I'm watching it happen, and it's getting worse. The slurred speech, the confusion, forgetting where he is, who people are, basic facts. The physical instability. These aren't just signs of aging. I age too. Every president does. But this is different. These are symptoms, red flags, the kind medical professionals recognize immediately. And here's what keeps me up at night. He's the sitting president. Right now, with access to nuclear weapons, with the power to send troops into combat, and his health is failing in front of us. I'm going to walk you through what I'm seeing, the specific moments, the warning signs, the things his team tries to keep off camera. Because this isn't about politics anymore. This is about the safety of the country. Let me tell you what that job actually does to you. I walked into the Oval Office on January 20th, 2009. I was 47. I was in shape. I played basketball 3 times a week. I could run without thinking about it. My hair was mostly dark, just a little gray creeping in. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. 6 months in, my hair had gone noticeably gray. A year later, the lines on my face were deeper. By the end of my first term, people I hadn't seen since the campaign barely recognized me. I'd aged 15 years and 4. And here's the thing, that's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. Because the presidency isn't a job. It's a grinder. It takes everything and asks for more. Let me tell you what a day looked like. I'd wake up around 6, sometimes earlier if something was happening overseas. And something was always happening. Before I even got dressed, I was reading the Daily Brief. Every credible threat to Americans anywhere in the world. Terrorist plots, nuclear programs, military movements. Every single morning started with a list of nightmares. Then breakfast, if there was time, while I reviewed papers for the first meeting. By 7:30, I was in the Oval Office. And from that moment until I collapsed, 18 hours later, I didn't stop. Economic briefings, security meetings, calls with foreign leaders. And those calls weren't casual. Every word mattered. Every pause got analyzed. One wrong phrase could trigger an international incident. Then the decisions, the kind that stay with you. I authorized drone strikes knowing civilians might die. I sent young Americans into combat knowing some wouldn't come back. I made economic calls that affected millions of families, their jobs, their homes, their futures. The stress isn't like anything you felt. It's physical. My heart rate went up. My blood pressure climbed despite medication and exercise. I'd clench my jaw until my head pounded. The fatigue was constant. Some days, just keeping my eyes open in a meeting took effort. I had doctors monitoring me all the time. Blood tests, stress tests, cognitive evaluations. Not because they were paranoid, because if something happened to me, that wasn't just personal. That was a national security crisis. I watched what I ate. Michelle made sure of it. I worked out every morning, even when I was exhausted, because I knew if my body failed, I couldn't do the job. And still, the presidency aged me faster than anything else could have. I'd look at photos from my first inauguration, then 4 years later at the second. Different person, gray hair, deeper lines. My own daughters joked I looked like their grandfather. But what haunts me is thinking about the presidents who didn't have the stamina. Franklin Roosevelt, who died in office at 63, worn down by the Depression and the war. Lyndon Johnson, who left office looking 20 years older after just 5 and died of a heart attack 4 years later. The job literally killed him. Ronald Reagan, who started showing signs of Alzheimer's during his second term. His staff hid it. And I've wondered how many decisions were made by a man already losing his grip on reality. The presidency doesn't care how old you are or how healthy you think you are. It finds your weaknesses and exploits them. It takes everything and demands more. It ages you, breaks you down, and if you're not careful, it destroys you. So when I look at Trump now, a man who'll be 79, trying to return to the most demanding job on earth, I'm not looking at this as a Democrat versus a Republican. I'm looking at this as someone who knows what that job requires. And what I'm seeing scares me. Because if the presidency nearly broke me at 47, if it aged me visibly despite every precaution, what will it do to a man already showing serious decline? Someone 32 years older than I was when I started, who doesn't exercise, who has a history of poor health habits, and who's already exhibiting alarming symptoms. I'm about to show you what the media won't talk about, what Trump's team is hiding, what every American needs to understand. Because this isn't politics anymore. This is about survival. There was a moment when I stopped thinking he's just getting older and started thinking something is very wrong. October 2023. I was home. Someone sent me a clip from one of his rallies. Look, I don't usually watch his rallies. Life's too short. But this one caught my attention because of how many people were talking about it. I clicked play. What I saw shocked me. Trump was on stage, mid-rally, and he just stopped talking. He stood there, swaying slightly while music played for minutes. He didn't say a word, just swayed back and forth like he'd forgotten where he was or what he was doing. Now, I've given thousands of speeches. I know what a pause looks like. I know how to let an idea sink in, let a crowd react, build tension. This wasn't that. This was a man who looked lost. And the crowd, you could see it on their faces. Confusion, concern, people looking at each other like, is he okay? Should someone help him? But his staff just let him stand there, swaying, completely disconnected. I watched that clip 3 times. Each time, I felt a knot in my stomach, because I'd seen that look before, in world leaders I'd negotiated with who were in cognitive decline, in my own grandmother when Alzheimer's started taking hold. But that wasn't the only moment. That was just the one that made me pay attention. Once I started really looking, I saw a pattern. He confused Nikki Haley with Nancy Pelosi. Not once, multiple times. 2 completely different people, different ages, roles, parties. But in his mind, they'd merged into one person. He talked about Nancy Pelosi being responsible for security on January 6th, except he kept calling her Nikki Haley. His staff tried to clean it up. But I watched the videos. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. He genuinely seemed to think they were the same person. Then he claimed he ran against me in 2016. Let me be clear. I was not on the ballot in 2016. I couldn't be. I'd served my 2 terms. The Constitution prohibits a third. Every American who pays even basic attention to politics knows this. But Trump stood in front of thousands of people and insisted he'd run against me and won. And here's what made it worse. He didn't correct himself, didn't laugh it off. He seemed to genuinely believe it. In his mind, he defeated Barack Obama in an election. Reality had become negotiable. I started keeping track. The list grew longer every week. He told crowds he defeated me again, different rally, same delusion. He confused Hungary with Turkey, different countries, different continents, completely different geopolitical situations. But to him, interchangeable. He said his father was born in Germany, his father was born in New York, basic biographical information about his own family, and he got it wrong. He told a story about nearly crashing in a helicopter with Willie Brown. Willie Brown publicly said this never happened. Trump insisted it did, described it in vivid detail, an event that never occurred. Now let me tell you why this matters beyond just getting facts wrong. When I was president, I had to remember thousands of pieces of information. Names of world leaders and their families, details of trade agreements, specs of military equipment, historical context for current conflicts. And I had to recall all of it instantly in high-pressure situations where lives were on the line. If I'd confused Turkey with Hungary during a NATO meeting, that could have created a diplomatic crisis. If I'd forgotten basic facts about my own family, my staff would have been deeply concerned. If I'd started claiming things happened that didn't, my team would have had me tested for mental decline immediately. But what really shook me, what I couldn't stop thinking about, was hearing him talk. I get Trump's way of speaking. The meandering, the detours, the loose grip on facts. That's been his thing all along. But what I was seeing now was something else. This was breakdown. I watched him begin sentences with no idea how to land them, throw in words that didn't fit, jumbled nonsense like the wiring between his thoughts and his speech had come undone. I watched him slur, not like someone who'd been drinking, but like his mouth had stopped taking orders from his brain properly. There's a name for it in medicine, aphasia. When the link between thinking and talking snaps, you see it after strokes, you see it in dementia. Then there were the rallies where he'd be mid-sentence and just pivot to something random. Not a shift, a fracture. Immigration, then something about an election he won, then how big his crowds were, then back to immigration, except he'd lost the thread entirely. I've been watching candidates speak my whole adult life, seen them exhausted, seen them stumble over words, lose focus for a second. That's being human. This wasn't that. This was a warning sign. His people saw it too. You could tell by how they handled him. Fewer off-script moments, shorter speeches, tight control over which press he faced. They were protecting him, trying to keep the worst hidden. But what really chilled me was realizing something. Back in 2016, however loud and reckless Trump was, he could at least hold a thought together. Finish what he started saying. Recall simple truths about his own history. Tell one person apart from another, one country from the next. 8 years on, that version of him didn't exist anymore. What was left was someone living in a warped version of reality, where facts shifted, where memories couldn't be trusted, where basic mental processes were falling apart. I got on the phone, reached out to people I know, former intel officers, people who'd served in other White Houses, folks who understood what fitness for this job actually means. I asked them, tell me I'm not imagining this. Every one of them said the same thing. You're not imagining it. We see it too, and it's accelerating. That's when I understood this had crossed a line. It wasn't about disagreeing on policy. It wasn't partisan warfare. This was something much darker. This was a man whose mind was crumbling, trying to get his hands on the nuclear arsenal. And most of America didn't know how dire it had become. Let me tell you about a moment from my second term that reshaped how I see presidential health. Annual checkup with my doctors. Routine blood pressure, pulse, stress tests, then doctor. Jackson said something I'll never forget. He said, Mr. President, your body's writing a story. Every number we track, every scan we do, it's recording what this position is costing you. We have to stay alert. Because the second your body stops keeping pace with what this office demands, you stop being an asset to national security. You become a risk. That landed hard. He wasn't just talking about whether I was healthy. He was talking about whether I could still do the job. And he was absolutely right. So when I look at where Trump is physically now, I'm not being petty. I'm asking a straightforward question. Can this person handle what the presidency requires? Based on everything I've watched, the answer is no. Let me lay out what I've seen, step by step. Because when you put it all together, it's damning. Start with West Point. June 2020. Trump's giving a graduation speech. Time to leave the stage. There's a ramp. Not steep, not long, just a regular ramp. He couldn't handle it. I've watched that footage over and over. Trump treated that ramp like he was crossing a tightrope stretched over a cliff. He crept forward, leaned way back, took these tiny, shuffling steps. And what struck me most, he looked scared. His whole body screamed fear. He genuinely thought he might fall. I've walked down thousands of ramps, off planes, off stages, in rain, heat, every condition you can think of. What I saw in that video wasn't just being careful, That was someone dealing with a real mobility problem. His team scrambled for excuses. Said the ramp was slick, wasn't raining. Said his shoes had leather soles. Everyone else wore similar shoes and walked down without issue. Said he was just being cautious. Caution doesn't make basic walking that hard. What does? Neurological damage, balance trouble, coordination failure, spatial processing issues. Those are markers of Parkinson's, vascular dementia, stroke aftermath. And then came his reaction. Look, his response to that ramp incident told me everything I needed to know. Instead of just being straight with people, instead of acknowledging there might be an issue, he went on television and did this awkward jog trying to prove he was fine. It reminded me of watching a kid throw a fit to show everyone they're not tired. But here's the thing that wasn't a one-time moment. Once you know what to look for, you see it constantly. Like the water glass. I watched him at that same West Point speech trying to take a drink. He had to use both hands to bring the glass to his mouth. Both hands, like a child just learning how to hold a cup. And then he needed his other hand to help guide it back down. I work out. I know what basic strength looks like. Lifting a glass of water with one hand takes almost nothing unless something's seriously wrong. Unless you're dealing with tremors. Unless one side of your body isn't responding right. Unless you've had a stroke. So I reached out quietly to some neurologists I trust. Showed them footage without telling them who it was. Every one of them said some version of the same thing. Whoever this is, they're showing real signs of neurological damage. Then you watch how he breathes. You ever notice that? He'll be at a rally, just standing there talking, and within minutes he's gasping for air like he just finished a sprint. And all he's doing is talking. When I was in office, I stayed in shape because I had to. Some days I was on my feet 16, 17 hours straight, meeting after meeting, walking, climbing stairs. If I'd been out of breath just from talking, my doctors would have been all over me, worried about my heart. Trump's clearly got something going on with his cardiovascular system. Maybe it's the weight, and let's be real, he's clinically obese, or maybe it's something deeper, like heart disease. I don't know for sure. But I know he can't handle basic movement without his body showing distress. And then there's how he stands. You notice that? He's always leaning forward like he's about to fall over. At first I figured it was just him trying to hide his stomach or something. But then I read about this condition called camptocormia bent spine syndrome. Neurological. Makes it so you literally can't stand up straight. It's linked to Parkinson's and other degenerative brain conditions. Pull up a recent photo. Look at him standing next to someone else. See how far forward he's tilted? That's not just age. That's a symptom. And his hands, I started paying close attention to his hands because they don't lie. You can see his right hand trembling in video after video. He tries to cover it up by moving constantly, waving around, gesturing nonstop. But the second he goes still, you see it. The shake. That kind of tremor doesn't come from nowhere. It means Parkinson's, or essential tremor, or damage from small strokes. These aren't minor things. They're serious conditions that affect whether someone can actually function. Then there's the color of his skin. I know that sounds petty, but hear me out. Everyone makes jokes about the orange thing, but I started wondering, why does he look like that? Is it really just bad makeup, or is something else happening? Turns out, certain heart and blood pressure medications can change your skin tone. Beta blockers, for example, can give you this grayish or yellowish tint. Add in whatever he's spraying on his face and you get that strange orange look. But if he's taking those drugs, what's he treating? Heart disease? High blood pressure? And why won't he just say so? When I was president, everything was documented. Every pill I took. When I had polyps removed, people knew. When I tweaked my ankle playing ball, it got reported. That's not optional when you're president. It's required. Trump put out this ridiculous letter in 2015 from his doctor saying he'd be the healthiest president ever elected. Later, that same doctor admitted Trump wrote it himself. He wrote his own health report. Let that sink in. Then in 2018, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who was my doctor too, gave this press conference where he said, Trump had amazing genes and could live to be 200 if he ate better. It was absurd. pure spin. And since then, nothing. No real records, no honest evaluations, just empty reassurances while we watch him fall apart on camera. I talked to a cardiologist I know, asked him straight up, based on everything we can see, the weight, the breathing, the lack of exercise, the diet, how would you assess his heart? He didn't hesitate. He said, if someone came into my office looking like that, I'd run a full cardiac workup immediately. I'd be concerned about blocked arteries, about whether his heart can handle any kind of stress. And I'd warn him he's at real risk of a heart attack. A heart attack while he's president. Picture this. Trump's in the Situation Room. There's a crisis brewing with China. Or a terror attack just happened. The pressure's crushing. His heart's pounding. And then he goes down. Cardiac arrest. The president collapses. While the doctors are fighting to save him, who's running the country? Who's got the nuclear launch codes? Who's making the calls that could mean war? This isn't some far-fetched scenario. Based on what we can all see, it's a legitimate risk. And about his weight, I'm not trying to insult the guy. I'm talking about what it means medically. Trump's weight is a real medical concern. His doctor's official report said 244 pounds at 6'3", but people who've been around him say he's both shorter and heavier. Even if we go with what's on paper, that's obesity by medical standards. And that's not just about appearance. Obesity puts massive strain on your heart. It raises your chances of stroke, diabetes, and a dozen other life-threatening conditions. It makes every physical task harder, moving, breathing, even getting rest at night. Now add the relentless pressure of being president on top of that, and you've got a body that's one crisis away from breaking down completely. When I held that office, I stayed around 180 pounds. I made sure I was in healthy range because I understood something simple. If my body failed, I couldn't lead. Trump either doesn't get that, or he's lying to himself about the shape he's in. What's worse is his team knows it. They're managing him like a fragile asset. Fewer public events, shorter remarks. They keep him away from anything that might expose how limited he really is. It's all smoke and mirrors, tightly controlled footage, edited moments, scripted settings. But reality has a way of breaking through. The two-handed water bottle, the terror on his face going down that ramp, the labored breathing after barely any exertion. Those glimpses show what his handlers are working so hard to hide. Donald Trump's body is giving out. And if he takes office again, we'll have a president who physically can't handle what the job demands. That should scare everyone, no matter where you stand politically. Now I want you to try something. Pull up a Trump speech from 2016, any one from his first run. Then find one from this year. Watch them back to back. You'll see it immediately. Trump was never smooth. Even back then, he rambled. He repeated himself. He went off on tangents. But here's the key. He could actually complete a thought. He'd start a sentence and finish it. He could tell a story that had a beginning, middle, and end. He could stay focused on one subject for more than a few seconds. You might have hated what he said, but at least you could follow it. That version of him doesn't exist anymore. What's happening now is something else entirely. Something clinical. I know because I had to learn this. When you're president, you get intelligence briefings on foreign leaders, including their mental and physical health. You need to know if the person across the table is cognitively intact, because that changes how you deal with them. I remember getting reports on certain leaders we suspected were declining. Our analysts would break down their speech looking for patterns, more repetition than usual, trouble finding the right words, using the wrong words entirely, sentences that just trailed off into nothing, making up events to cover memory gaps. Every single one of those red flags shows up in Trump's recent appearances. Let me give you an example. September 2023. Trump's talking about World War II. Here's exactly what he said. We're going to take care of it. We're going to have the biggest World War II. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We're going to do numbers. Big, big numbers. Read that again. That's not a coherent idea. That's his brain failing to connect the start of a sentence to where it's supposed to end. So he just fills the gap with noise. Big, big numbers. What does that even mean when you're talking about World War II? When I was in office, sure, I had people review my prepared remarks, but I could also think on my feet. Press conferences, town halls, interviews. I could hear a question, process it, and give a response that actually addressed what was being asked. Was I long-winded sometimes? Absolutely. Michelle used to tease me about giving essays when a yes or no would do. But the key is I was answering. There was logic. There was structure. Point A led to point B, led to point C. Trump can't do that anymore. I actually started keeping a file, and yes, I really did this, of his most incoherent moments from the last year or so. Not the offensive stuff, not even the lies. Just the statements that flat out don't make sense. The ones that show his brain isn't handling language the way it should. Here's one from Iowa. I said the other day, what if? What if? I said, think of it. Think of it. And people, some people, and I know people, they come up to me, strong people, tough people, people you wouldn't believe. Sir, what you said, and I said it. I did. I said it before. Nobody said it. I'm the only one. You see what's happening there? He's not actually communicating anything. He's just creating the feeling of communication. There's no idea, no point. Just fragments strung together that get his crowd fired up without ever landing on substance. Linguists have a term for this, semantic aphasia. It's when your brain loses the ability to tie words to actual meaning. You can still talk, the speech part of your brain still works, but the part that organizes thought into language is falling apart. And it's accelerating. I watched a rally from November 2024 where Trump stopped mid-sentence at least a dozen times. Not for effect, not for drama. He genuinely lost where he was going. You could see it on his face, that flash of confusion, that search for what comes next. And then he'd just jump to something completely different. He'd be talking about the economy, then suddenly he's talking about winning an election he lost, then windmills causing cancer, then back to the economy, but he can't remember what he was originally trying to say. This isn't just scattered thinking. This is clinical. I called a neurologist friend at Johns Hopkins, sent him some clips without saying who it was, asked him what he saw. He watched and said, "This person is showing multiple signs of frontotemporal dementia or Alzheimer's. The inability to hold a narrative together, struggling to find words, thoughts that spin off in random directions. These are textbook symptoms. I'd want them evaluated immediately." When I told him it was Trump, he wasn't shocked. He said neurologists across the country have been talking about this privately for years. They see the same decline I'm seeing, but they won't say it publicly because they're afraid of looking political. Here's the thing. Though spotting cognitive decline isn't politics, it's medicine. And what's happening here is medical, not political. Let me give you another moment that really shook me. A reporter asked Trump a simple question. What will you do about the national debt? Basic policy question. Any candidate should be able to give some kind of answer. You might disagree with it, but at least there should be an answer. Here's what he said. Well, the thing about debt, and people don't know this, but I know it better than anybody. We're going to make deals, big deals, the best deals. And countries, they owe us money, a lot of money. China, they owe us, and we're going to get it back. All of it. More than you can believe. Numbers that nobody's ever seen. That's not an answer. That's not even close. That's someone who doesn't grasp the question, doesn't understand the issue, and is covering it up with noise that sounds confident. His crowd cheers anyway. They hear the certainty and mistake it for competence. They don't realize or don't care that he said absolutely nothing. But I notice, and it terrifies me. Because I remember having to answer hard questions on the spot. Military strategy, economic policy, constitutional law. And I had to give real answers. Not word salad. Not confident-sounding gibberish. Substance. There was a press conference in 2009, right in the middle of the financial crisis. Someone asked me about the bank stress tests we were running. I had to explain on the fly how they worked, why we were doing them, what the standards were, what it meant for the financial system, and I could do it because I understood the material. I'd read the briefing books. I'd talk to the experts. My brain could take in the information and explain it clearly. Could Trump do that today? No. Could he have done it back in 2016? Maybe, on his best day. Can he do it now? Not even close. And his team knows it. That's why they dodge unscripted moments. That's why press conferences are rare. That's why questions get pre-screened. That's why interviews get cut short when he starts to unravel. They're weekend at Bernie'sing this whole thing, propping him up and praying no one notices how far gone he really is. But I notice, and once you see it, you can't look away. There's this pattern Trump's developed that's especially telling. He'll start a sentence strong, then halfway through he realizes he has no idea where it's going. So he repeats a few words to stall, while his brain scrambles to find the end. Like this. We're going to fix immigration. We're going to fix it. Fix it like nobody's ever seen before. Fixed. And the wall, I built the wall, well, not all of it, but more than anybody. And they said I couldn't, but I did. And now they want to tear it down. But they can't because it's too strong. The strongest wall. And Mexico, they were going to pay for it. And they did indirectly through the trade deal, which was the best trade deal. Nobody's ever seen a deal like it. Count how many times he circles back. Fix it. Fix it. The wall. The strongest wall. The best trade deal. That's called perseveration. When someone gets stuck on certain words and can't move forward. Classic marker of decline. I've also noticed his vocabulary shrinking. Back in 2016, whatever his flaws, Trump at least used a range of words. Now everything's either big, strong, best, or worst. His descriptions have collapsed down to the most basic adjectives possible. That's not style, that's vocabulary loss. Another red flag. And the lying, even that's changed. Trump's always lied. That's not an insult, it's just observable reality. But his lies used to have a purpose. They were calculated, designed to push people in a certain direction. Now his lies feel random. He'll claim things that are easily fact-checked and proven false. Things that don't even help him. Things that actually hurt him politically. Like insisting he won states he clearly lost. Like saying he ran against me in an election that never took place. Like describing detailed events that simply didn't happen. These aren't strategic lies anymore. These are confabulations. His brain is filling in missing pieces with invented memories. And he actually believes them. That's what makes it so dangerous. He's not deliberately lying anymore. He truly thinks these false memories are real. I've watched this with people suffering from dementia. They'll spin out elaborate tales about things that never occurred, and they're totally convinced it happened. Their mind is breaking down, and they can't see it. That's Trump right now. His brain is given out, he doesn't realize it, and he's trying to become president. Here's the reality. When I was in office, if I'd started displaying these kinds of problems, the confused speech, the memory gaps, the jumbled words, the invented stories, my team would have been legally bound to use the 25th Amendment. They would have had to declare me unfit and remove me. That's not dramatic talk. That's protocol. Because you cannot let someone whose mind is collapsing make decisions about launching nuclear weapons, sending soldiers into battle, or enacting economic policies that affect millions of families. Yet Trump is going after that job again, and his handlers are burying how far gone he really is. When I watch him speak these days, I'm not even processing the words. There's rarely substance anyway. I'm tracking the red flags, the loops, the broken sentences, the fabricated events, the hunt for basic vocabulary, the wild tangents. And each time, the evidence of serious, advancing mental breakdown becomes clearer. This isn't about left versus right. This is neuroscience. And neurologically speaking, Donald Trump's mind is deteriorating. The country has a right to know. Back in 2008, when I was campaigning for the first time, people had questions about my health. Some fair, some just political noise. What did I do? I released everything. Not cliff notes. Not a quick letter from my doctor saying I was in great shape. The full medical file, blood work, cholesterol numbers, The fact that I used to smoke but quit all there. What prescriptions I took. How often I had a drink. My fitness regimen. No secrets. Why? Because anyone running for president owes the public transparency about whether they can actually handle the job. That's not a courtesy. That's the standard. Every serious candidate held to that until Trump came along. Let me show you what he's put out, because the gap is staggering. Back in 2015, he released a note from his personal physician, Harold Bornstein, and what this note said was absurd. It declared that Trump's strength and stamina were extraordinary, and that he would be the healthiest person ever to hold the office. Not healthy, not in good shape. The healthiest in history. Think about that claim. Healthier than Teddy Roosevelt, who was a fighter and an adventurer. Healthier than Bill Clinton, who jogged daily. Healthier than me, someone 3 decades younger who was playing full-court basketball constantly. Totally laughable. But here's where it gets wild. Bornstein later confessed that Trump wrote that letter. Trump assessed his own health and had the doctor sign off on it. Picture me writing my own report card and giving myself straight A's. That's what went down. And it doesn't stop there. While Trump was president, his physician was Ronnie Jackson, the same guy who'd cared for me. Jackson was solid, meticulous, straightforward. Then in January 2018, Jackson held a briefing about Trump's health. What he said didn't hold up. He claimed Trump had amazing genetics and might reach 200 years old if his diet improved. 200. I'm not making this up. A White House doctor publicly suggested Trump could hit 2 centuries. That's not healthcare. That's spin. Jackson also listed Trump at 239 pounds and 6'3", which conveniently places him just under the obese threshold by 1 pound. But anyone who's seen Trump knows those figures don't track. He weighs more, and he's probably not that tall. I stand 6'1". I've been beside him. There's no way he's got 2 full inches on me. Maybe 1. Maybe we're the same. And I know what 239 looks like on someone 6'3". That's not Trump. So from the jump, the basic data was questionable. But what really jumped out at me was what they left out. No thorough cardiac evaluation, even with clear risk signs. No brain function tests, despite obvious mental concerns. Almost no medication details. Zero discussion of his family's Alzheimer's history. Yes, his father had Alzheimer's. That matters enormously. Fred Trump got Alzheimer's. Late in life. It's hereditary. There's a genetic component. If I were treating Trump, that family background alone would trigger regular mental evaluations. Has he been tested? No idea. He won't tell us. Compare that to my transparency. Every year I was in office, I got a full physical, and everything was made public. The American people knew exactly what my health looked like. Blood pressure, 110/68. Cholesterol breakdown, 213 total, 138 LDL, 68 HDL, 44 triglycerides controlled with meds, resting pulse, 56 beats per minute. Strong. Fitness routine. Cardio 6 times weekly, plus strength work. Drinking. Light. Occasional. Smoking. Stopped years back. Completely clean since. Every pill I took, down to the dose. My colonoscopy findings, including harmless polyps they took out. Eyesight, hearing, teeth, all of it. The public had full visibility into my health because that's what they're owed. What do Americans actually know about Trump's condition? Almost nothing. And the scraps we do get come from sources with every reason to bend the truth. After that 2018 exam, Trump basically went dark on real health updates. You'd get vague statements about him being in excellent shape, but no specifics. No data, no test outcomes, nothing. And that's chilling. Because we're watching him break down right in front of us, but without his actual records, we can't measure just how deep the damage goes. I started digging, reached out to doctors I trust, people who understand what presidential health protocols demand. Asked them point blank, what might he be hiding? What they told me was alarming. A cardiologist said, if someone came to me looking like Trump, the weight, the eating habits, the sedentary lifestyle, the family heart disease history, I'd run the full battery. EKG, echocardiogram, stress test, calcium scan. If he's not sharing those results, it's probably because they're ugly. A neurologist said the speech issues we're seeing, the movement problems, the mental symptoms, those demand immediate neurological screening, MRI, cognitive exams, evaluation for Parkinson's or similar diseases. If those results aren't public, there's a reason. A psychiatrist said even apart from the cognitive red flags, his behavior raises questions about personality disorders or other mental health conditions that should be assessed. But there's no chance he'd ever let that information out. So here's what we're in the dark about. We don't know if he suffered a stroke or multiple strokes. That sudden, unannounced trip to Walter Reed in 2019, they called it routine. But routine checkups don't happen on weekends with zero advance warning. We don't know what drugs he's on. Blood thinners, beta blockers, cholesterol meds, anti-anxiety pills, stimulants, no clue. We don't know his real weight or BMI. The figures they've given us are almost certainly fake. We don't know if he's been tested for cognitive breakdown, and if he has, what the scores were. Did he take the Montreal cognitive assessment? What'd he get? Did he even pass? We don't know about his heart. Has he done a cardiac stress test? What did it show? Does he have blocked arteries? We don't know about his brain health. Has he had an MRI? Are there signs of prior strokes? Evidence of shrinkage linked to dementia? We don't know his deeper family medical background. What other diseases run in the family? What's his genetic risk? These are all things Americans deserve to know, and they're all things Trump is deliberately hiding. Now, his fans will say, I'm just being partisan, that I don't like the guy. But this has nothing to do with personal feelings. This is about honesty and capability. When John McCain ran in 2008, he was 72 younger than Trump is now. McCain released over 1,100 pages of medical documentation. 1,100. Because he recognized his age and health were fair game, and he owed people answers. Trump is 79. He's put out basically nothing, a couple flimsy letters and one sketchy press event from 2018. That's it. Why? What's he covering up? I've got a theory, grounded in what I've watched and what medical experts have told me. I think Trump has had at least one stroke. That unexplained Walter Reed visit, the sudden mobility struggles, the slurred speech, the mental fog, all consistent with stroke aftermath. I think his heart is in far worse shape than his people admit. The labored breathing, the obesity, the zero exercise. He's a serious candidate for a catastrophic cardiac event. I think cognitive tests have shown real decline. That's why he won't share them. That's why when he took that basic screening, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, he acted like passing was some huge win. Passing that test is the absolute floor. It's like celebrating because you can count to 10. And I think his inner circle knows all this. His doctors know. And they've chosen to bury it. Because if the public saw the real records, the actual test outcomes, the diagnoses, he'd be done as a candidate. So they're gambling on ignorance, betting Americans won't notice the decline, or won't care, or are too tribalized to let health override politics. And here's what scares me most. They might be right. We're living in a time when facts are negotiable, when people believe whatever fits their worldview, evidence be damned. When transparency has been swapped out for spin. But biology doesn't care about your politics. Cognitive decay doesn't check your voter registration. Heart failure doesn't care about your messaging strategy. And if Trump wins, if he somehow convinces enough people he's capable despite everything pointing otherwise, we're going to learn the hard way what happens when a president's body and mind collapse while they're in power. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy had to make instant calls that could have meant nuclear annihilation or survival. His thinking had to be razor sharp, his judgment flawless. One misstep could have wiped out civilization. Picture Trump in that moment right now, with his confusion, with his inability to remember basic realities, with his inability to finish a single clear thought. I can picture it, and it terrifies me. The medical files Trump refuses to release would settle these questions. They'd show whether he's capable or whether he's a crisis waiting to detonate. But he won't release them, and his base doesn't seem to care. So we're stuck watching someone fall apart publicly, knowing something's deeply wrong, but unable to access the proof that would confirm it beyond any doubt. And that's exactly what Trump wants, because the truth would sink him, and he knows it. There's a day from my time in office that still haunts me. October 2013. I got word that morning that a terrorist cell had acquired materials for a potential dirty bomb. Intel said an attack might be coming within 2 days. We didn't know the target. We didn't know the exact timeline. But the threat was real. I had to move fast. Green light drone strikes on suspected sites. Send in special ops teams. Sync up with intelligence partners across half a dozen countries. Brief Congress. Get the public ready for what might be coming without triggering mass panic. And to do all that, I needed a brain firing on all cylinders. Processing mountains of data instantly. Weighing a dozen variables at once. Understanding how one choice would ripple into the next. Functioning under crushing pressure for days straight with barely any sleep. One bad call could have killed thousands. One moment of fog, one slip in judgment, one failure to grasp what I was reading and people die. That's what the job demands. Not every day, thankfully. But when it counts, when the decisions define whether people survive or don't, you've got to be mentally locked in. Now picture Trump in that moment. Not 2016 Trump, today's Trump, the one who trails off mid-sentence, who mixes up people constantly, who forgets basic details about his own past. Scared yet? You should be. Most Americans don't fully grasp what the nuclear football is. It's a briefcase that shadows the president constantly. Inside is everything needed to authorize a nuclear launch. And here's the part that should chill you. From the second the president decides to strike to the moment those missiles are airborne, about 5 minutes. 5 minutes to decide whether to end the world as we know it. There's no vote, no appeal, no time to mull it over. The president hears the briefing, reviews the options, makes the call, and confirms it with codes. All of it hinges on being able to absorb complex intel fast and make a clear-headed choice under unimaginable pressure. I drilled for this. During the transition, they walked me through scenarios. Mr. President, we've detected an incoming nuclear strike. You have 4 minutes to respond. 4 minutes, not hours, not days, minutes. In those drills, I had to recall codes, understand military jargon, grasp the global fallout of each option, ask the right questions, and be absolutely sure I knew what I was greenlighting. Can Trump do that now? Can someone who forgets who he's talking about, who can't string together a clear thought, who gets basic facts backwards, can he handle the nuclear football? I spoke with a former officer involved in nuclear command. Asked him straight up, what happens if a president's mind is failing during a nuclear emergency? Long silence. Then he said, Obama, that's the worst case scenario everyone prays never comes. Because there's no real safeguard. The system's built for speed, not deliberation. It assumes the president is mentally intact. If he's not, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. But it's not just nukes. It's everything. Let me walk you through what a normal day looked like for me, and you decide whether Trump could handle it. Morning. Immediate update on what happened overnight. Terror attack in Europe. Earthquake in Asia. North Korea firing off test missiles. I had to take all that in before my first coffee. Presidential daily brief. 30 to 40 pages of dense intelligence. Terror threats. Troop movements. Political shifts. Cyber attacks. I had to read it, process it, ask smart questions, and decide what to do. 8 a.m. First meetings. Economic team briefing on jobs data and policy moves. National security, discussing escalating tensions in the Middle East. These weren't simple slideshows. They were deep, technical conversations where I had to follow intricate details and make informed calls. And that rhythm continued all day. Meeting. Decision. Call with a foreign leader where I had to be sharp, informed, and clear. By 10 p.m., when I finally got a break, my brain felt fried, but I couldn't shut down. Because at any second, the phone could ring, "Mr. President, we've got a situation." That was my reality for 8 years. I was in my 40s and 50s, healthy, sharp, and it still almost destroyed me. Trump is 79, showing clear signs of serious mental decline, and he wants this job again. Let me make it even more concrete. In 2011, we were planning the bin Laden raid. I sat through sessions where we dissected every detail: layout of the compound, number of choppers, backup plans, risks, timing. I had to hold all of it in my head, understand how the pieces connected, anticipate failures, and have contingencies locked in. When the operation went live, I was in the Situation Room making calls in real time as intel poured in. At one point, one of our helicopters malfunctioned and went down. In that instant, I had to grasp what happened, what it meant for the mission, and whether to pull everyone out or push forward. Lives on the line, no time for hesitation or confusion. Could Trump handle that today? Could he track a fast-moving, high-stakes situation and make split-second calls? Or would he get lost, forget the details, and make a fatal mistake? Or think about the Iran nuclear talks? I had to get deep into the mechanics of uranium enrichment, know the differences between centrifuge models, understand the inspection framework we were building, grasp how the economic sanctions worked and what effects they'd have. And I had to keep all of that active in my mind while negotiating with Iranian officials, staying aligned with our allies, and handling pushback from Congress. It took sharp focus, sustained concentration, the ability to absorb and hold on to mountains of technical detail. Trump can't finish a sentence. He forgets who he's referring to. He invents stories wholesale. Can he manage nuclear talks with Iran? Can he follow the fine print of arms agreements? Can he remember what he committed to 5 minutes earlier? Here's something else that keeps me up: Trump's vulnerability to being played. When your mind is slipping, you become an easier mark. You're more likely to believe whoever spoke to you last. You can't separate solid information from garbage. You fall for flattery easier and miss when people are lying straight to your face. I dealt with some of the sharpest manipulators on the planet: Putin, Xi Jinping, people who've spent lifetimes mastering psychological games. How did I defend against them? By staying sharp, doing the homework, having my team prep me on their tactics inside and out, staying mentally locked in so they couldn't worm their way inside my head. Trump barely remembers what he ate this morning. You think Putin can't work him? You think Xi isn't excited about facing an American president whose brain is failing? Let me tell you what Putin did when he got FaceTime with Trump. He stroked his ego, played to his vanity, and Trump swallowed it whole. Trump believed Putin over his own intelligence community, sided with Putin against American interests. And that was supposedly Trump at his peak. Imagine what Putin could do with him now, in this condition. Imagine the concessions he could squeeze out. Imagine the harm to our national security. That's not even manipulation anymore. That's exploitation, and it's a catastrophe waiting to unfold. I'm also concerned about something called sundowning. It's common in dementia patients. Their mental function collapses significantly in the evening. They get more confused, more agitated, more impaired. We've already seen traces of this with Trump. His worst performances, his most garbled moments, they tend to happen later in the day. Back when he was on Twitter, his posts would get more unhinged as night came on. Now picture this. It's 11 p.m. There's a crisis, terror attack, military standoff, natural disaster. And the president is sundowning. His brain is at its lowest functioning point, and he's supposed to make life or death calls. What happens then? Who's really deciding? His aides? His family? Because it sure won't be him if his mind's checked out for the night. When I was president, I couldn't afford windows where I was mentally offline. The job doesn't clock out at 5. Crises don't wait for convenient hours. I had to be cognitively ready around the clock. Can Trump do that? Clearly not. And here's what really eats at me. His team knows. They're not blind. They see what we all see. They know he's declining. They know he's unfit. But they're hiding it. Controlling his schedule. limiting his public exposure, building a wall of protection around him. And if he wins, that's what the presidency becomes. Not Trump actually leading, but a circle of unelected handlers calling the shots while he falls apart in real time. That's not democracy. That's a puppet regime, and it's horrifying. I remember the night after I won in 2008. I was alone in my hotel room in Chicago, and the enormity of what I'd just signed up for crashed over me. The nuclear codes, the responsibility, the fact that people's survival would rest on my judgment. I felt the weight, but I also felt ready. I knew my mind was intact. I knew I could carry it. Can Trump honestly say that? Can he look at himself and say, yes, I'm mentally capable of controlling nuclear weapons? I don't think so. I don't think he has the self-awareness to even see his own breakdown. And that might be the most terrifying piece of all. Because a president who doesn't realize he's impaired is more dangerous than one who does. At least if you know you're struggling, you can adjust, delegate, ask for backup. But Trump thinks he's perfect, thinks he's the healthiest president in history. He has zero awareness of what's happening to him. And that's the man reaching for the nuclear codes. Sleep well, America.